waiting. I still think that's the most awkward thing in the world to do, is to wait for that thing to come through, because you're looking at yourself thinking, oh my goodness, I've been really busy this morning. I've been racing around the house like a lunatic getting things done. I've just finished the readings for May, so I'll get them up for you later. And I thought, oh goodness, I haven't done this. So I might get on and just see who's on board and who's here to say hello to this morning. I don't think I'll talk about anything particular. I think I might read you a card from the animal. Hey, Sarah, how you going? I might pull you a card from the Animal Spirit Guidebook. I've been sort of pulling out some of the decks because somebody asked me about 3 or 4 days ago how many decks I had, and I pulled them all out. Hey, Hayley, how you going? I pulled them all out to have a look at how many decks I actually had. So while I was there, of course, I find decks that I've forgotten I had. So I've been looking at some of those and going over them. And this particular one, there was a reader who was on Facebook, on YouTube last year, who was really, really good, and I loved her. And she gave up reading for a period of time, and she used to always read from this particular deck, and I just loved it. It was always so resonated with me, and it was just beautiful. So now I like to read from there too. Hey, how are you, Miss Orlando? Or Mr. Orlando? Can't tell from your name. Vane. Thank you very much for sending your blessings to me, and I'll be sending you blessings from us. Actually, I was having this, I don't know if you guys are on Facebook. Vanessa, how are you? We have this thing in Australia which started off with people, because the only time we could go out was to put our bins out. And we have pretty big bins here in most places. They're different all over Australia, but we have like big wheelie bins. And somebody started the getting dressed to take the bin out. And now there is a Facebook page for people taking their bins out. And honestly, it's the biggest laugh ever. People getting all dressed up with the funny costumes. I know, they've been fabulous. So we've got people doing it all over the world now. So I watched a guy this morning from Germany. There's a really cool drag queen in Australia who's been doing it. And so have a look. If you're on Facebook, have a look. Bin outings. I can't remember the exact name for the Facebook page, but it's funny. It is hysterical. Some of them actually have been recording songs, and some dress the bins up. Everybody can participate. It's so funny. And then I watched in England where they were doing the YMCA, and all the people in the street got dressed up as the characters. And I'm like, people are really making the best of this time, which is really cool. So so I don't know what you all got planned today. You can see it's really, I didn't need to use my light today because that's actually the sunshine coming in today. So it's absolutely beautiful here in Australia. So I'm going to pull you a card here. What did they say? Rub the spots off the deck. Okay, so we have the camel coming out here. So I'm wondering what the camel means, because I don't read them that often, so I have to pretty much start every time. I have too many things to remember. Okay. But anyway, the camel. So this is about being resourceful, independent, and knowing oneself. Very interesting for this time. So the camel can handle absolutely everything, as it carries a wealth of nourishment within. This wondrous creature is self-reliant and handles challenge with ease. Even in the face of excess, heat, judgment, or anger, the camel searches inside for the cool elixir of water to calm the situation. The camel represents the ultimate form of bringing opposites into balance, fire and water, and being responsible for one's own reactions. The camel is a wonderful traveller and is especially fond of trips to faraway lands. So that's very interesting. I have been working with people a lot lately with core beliefs. I'm not sure if you all sort of have wondered about what core beliefs are. Hey, how are you, Georgia girl? It's still Friday here. That's how you're feeling, Sarah. Are you feeling well? Please let me know. And that's really nice for you to get the camel out, because it's saying to you, you've got the resources inside of you, which is really nice. Been talking to a lot of people about core beliefs. Oh, you do you? Oh, that's pretty tough. So what do you do? Just watch a bit of television, just relax, be calm, have some nice, pleasant time for yourself? We'll all send you some love and healing from here. And yeah, people's core beliefs. Thank you, Hayley. That's a beautiful thing to do. And core beliefs are often things that we've learned in childhood that we tend to sort of grab onto and think that they are who we are. There's a lot of reasons for that. You know, sometimes they could be said when you're a very small child and you don't have the capacity to sort of discern between, hey, Darcy, 2 days in a row, go, you go. And often we take them on board. So, you know, if your parent sort of says something to you, and it may be, it's never that your parent, or well, mostly, actually, that's probably the wrong thing to say completely. Sometimes it's not because your parent realizes what they're saying to you. But at other times, they may do it intentionally to sort of put you in your place. But what happens is you then adopt that core belief as so I'm laughing at Darcy's comment. The core belief will stick with you. So I'm trying to think of an example, and I'm sure you can all come up with something. But you know, your parent may say something to you like, you know, you will never amount to anything. So you grow up thinking that's it, that's how it's going to be. And we've been doing a lot of that lately. And I just think that sometimes when I pull the cards out, I think, you know, some of that information that we've learned over the years, we do adopt as our own, and we do think that things are impossible for us, and we don't really understand, you know, the capacity we have as human beings to do things that we want to do. And I think a lot of you, you know, when I'm talking to you, whether it's in readings or whether it's through the readings I do, the core beliefs come up a lot in readings, where people are limiting themselves by not doing what they want to do. So, you know, for example, you could work, you know, most of your life in a job you don't really like, when your dream is to own your own crystal shop. And you may do that because you don't have the money or the resources, but a lot of the time you don't do it because you don't believe that you can make that successful. So sometime or some stage in your life, somebody may have said to you, you know, that's an unreasonable thing to want to do. How can you ever make a success of that? So you don't do it. So a lot of the people that come through for readings very often have things in their life that they haven't really gone after because they truly don't believe. Hey, Annette, how you going? That's one of my favorite emojis, the one with the smile. Hey, Lenore, how you going? So with core beliefs, sometimes it's really hard, and it's come up a lot in the readings lately that people are holding on to things that are holding them back. The Alchemist is a beautiful book to read. And it's so beautiful. It made me cry several times. I could tell you a story about that in a moment. Hey, Susan, how you going? So what happens with in the readings lately, I've just started my iPad off again. Did you hear it talking? Is it comes up a lot that people are hanging on to things. They're not allowing things to go. So some of those are around your core beliefs. So if you've got time, start thinking about how you do things and how perhaps things you've been told in the past hold you back now. I mean, I can remember taking on a lot of those crappy things along the way, but it's something that's coming up a lot at the moment, along with the ego stuff. So it's obviously got something to do with that. But The Alchemist was a book that everybody kept recommending to me, and it was sort of like a bit of a weird thing for me because somebody had been talking about it, and I thought, wow, that sounds like a really cool book. I'll get that. And then, of course, it forgot about it. And then I remember probably maybe half a dozen people saying to me how much they enjoyed it. Hey, Michelle, how you going? Hey, Teresa from Canada. And I remember kept putting off getting The Alchemist. Anyway, eventually I went in somewhere, and of course it was in my face. So I thought, I'll go ahead and read it. And it was such a different book to what I thought it was gonna be about, seriously. But there's sort of like all these like beautiful hidden messages in there that are so enlightening and so awakening. And it's only a little tiny story, but it really shifted my consciousness. It was a really clever book. I haven't read any more. It's Paul Coelho, isn't it, who did that book? I haven't read any more of his books, but that one did make a very big impression. Still sits on my bookcase to this day. There's a few things in there that really shifted my thinking. Oh, rightio, yeah. 26 years later. Now that sounds like my story, doesn't it? Oh, so you only read it 2 weeks ago. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful book. I'll go back and read it again. That's why I kept it. Books I've read 26 years later. Has anybody read The Catcher in the Rye? Because that was my book from school that I loved, and I remember it being either banned or it became a book that people didn't sort of want people to read. It was pretty raw for its time, and I remember reading that when I was at school age. I was a big book reader, and I remember reading it years later. Yeah, Paulo Coelho. And I read it years later. If you ever have a chance to read The Catcher in the Rye, it's another book that's sort of, you love KFC. They're all books that stay with us, aren't they? I watched Stephen King talking on a video clip this morning, and I thought, there was a time when I'd read everything Stephen King did. I was just such a huge fan of his, and obviously bought all as the movies came out from his books, I bought all the movies too. I just loved reading. I don't have as much time nowadays, so I tend to sort of read non-fiction because I can sort of flick through and read as I want to. But some of the books, yeah, like Catcher in the Rye and The Alchemist, like those books have just got so many hidden gems in them around things you think about and do, like little enlightenments. So enjoyed both of them. Has anybody else got any books that have really shifted their consciousness other than Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now? Because I really enjoyed that one. Not so much because even though Catcher in the Rye and The Alchemist are stories, they still have a lot of things in them that sort of, hit home. I'm trying to think because there's been a couple of books I've gone back and read again. Yeah. Oh, Stephen King is scary. I never found Stephen King scary until I read It. And I can remember, hey, Joanne, how you going? Yes, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. That's on my book step. And so is the Celestine Prophecies. I've got the Celestine plus the next 2 books that he wrote after those. The Celestine Prophecies, I remember being really enlightened about my empathy. I don't know that one, Sarah. I Am the Messenger. I might write that one down. And who was it by? Oh, Cujo. That was a really cool book. How funny. Okay, where are we going? Back to Marcus Zusak. I just want to write that one down in case I do have. I usually now, I don't so much because I was a Dean Koontz fan for years too. I don't so much watch the horrors so much. Hey, Felice, how you going? I tend to sort of stick with the detective-y things now. I love, some of those books. Patricia Cornwell, those sort of books now that I really enjoy. But Stephen King, yeah, there was a time when, that's what I was saying. I read It. And there was a part in the book where the door handle in my lounge room actually came down, like somebody was about to walk in the door and there was nobody home. And I was right in the middle of the book and it frightened me so badly. I threw the book on the lounge, went tearing out the house and stood in the backyard for like 5 minutes and then went, what did I do that for? Oh, funny. But no, Cujo, yeah, I think Cujo, the book, was so much better than the movie because it sort of talked through the dog's thinking, which was pretty cool. So some of the books are so powerful, but the movies, they really haven't captured that energy. But yeah, was a very big Stephen King fan. But at the moment, as I said, I tend to sort of read non-fiction books now because I can pick them up and pop them down. There was a book somebody else recommended to me not long ago. and I'm pretty sure it may have been one of you guys. And I can't remember the name of it now, but someone recommended it, perhaps on Facebook. But anyway, may get those. The Feel the Fears and Do It Anyway. Some of those books have been great things for me over the years, understanding my own power. So I've read a lot of those, what they call pop psychology. Still wary of St. Bernard's. Oh, you're too funny. They are beautiful dogs. I always they're so huge. Um, Care of the Soul by Thomas More. Okay, I haven't heard of that one either. I might have a look at that. But I have a lot of books on my bookcase that I've read, but I've kept because I've enjoyed them so much. The Celestine Prophecies, as I said, there's probably 2 other books after that. I can't remember the name of them. Shambhala and 13th Step, something like that. But the Celestine Prophecies was definitely, some of those books have been life changers for me. As I said, in that one, it was about the energy vampires and understanding people sapping your energy. That was a big one for me to understand what was happening with me, because I didn't get it then. Hey, Emily, how you going? The Power of Now. Oh, you're loving it. Yeah, it's a brilliant book. That it's such a powerful book because I don't think we really understand how much we live in the past and how much we sort of try to control the future. And it really is, it was life-changing for me to understand that. I learned how to get out of my head and how to be in my body, rather than being up in the thinking all the time. So very big book for me. It also started me off on a bit of a meditation journey too. But yeah, you'll really enjoy that. He has a couple of good books after that as well. So once you've read that, let me know and I'll tell you what else is good to read of his. But he's fabulous. I've seen him live too. I saw him in Sydney a couple of years ago, and his energy is just, it's electric. It's just so good. Like in a big theatre, you still really felt like you were in a room with him on his own. He has a very, very strong power. But I'm not really sure. So, today I've already done the May readings, so I'll get them up for you guys later. And I'll do the weeklies as planned tomorrow. I'm not sure what I'm going to. Yeah, I love the astrology books too, Darcy. I just find it really hard to take in all the information. Buddhist Standard Time now. I've been listening a little bit to some things on YouTube. So I think I told you I've been sort of watching a bit of some of the YouTube clips around living in the moment rather than living in the past or the future. So I've been working a little bit on that. That's been my big thing at the moment, not controlling outcomes. Been a bit of a control freak for most of my life, and it's been very difficult for me to understand how I cling to things. But also done a lot of work around codependency. So Codependent No More is a really good book. If you're sort of feeling you have codependent tendencies with people. Yeah, Star Signs and Sun Signs. Yeah, they were very, very good books. One of them talked about relationships and was very, very good on relationships too. Sorry, I keep reading off here and then I think nobody really knows what I'm talking about there. So Darcy was talking about Linda Goodman's books here. Yeah, so I think they were very good because they were very basic terms, really easy to understand. So yeah, so some of the books, some of the journey I've been on, I guess, I've sort of been lucky enough that Spirit has shown me what books to read. All of you, yeah. I think a good deal of us, with the codependency thing, I presume you're talking about. It's been a big journey with that. Hey, Chandra, how you going? But yeah, definitely we can all do for some learning around that. But especially if you're an empath, if you have that real strong empath ability, because you tend to be sort of so much of a giver and trying to fix people, trying to always be the helper, investing all your energy in others. And even though there's obviously a lot of problems and issues with ourselves for wanting that or for needing that. Oh, you've not been to sleep. Chandra said she's sleepless. Have you been doing too much work? Is that what it is? Control outcomes. Yeah. So we sort of all on, and this is what somebody said to me one day. Somebody wrote to me on the YouTube channel and said, perhaps you're reading for yourself because you keep pulling the tower out. I think it was something to that effect. And I remember stopping and thinking, yeah, well, I suppose I can apply this to my own life. And then I realized I'm part of a collective. We're all going through the same thing. We're all working our way through, our empathy, our codependence, our egos. This is what we're doing. And that controlling outcomes is a huge one at the moment because somebody said, I don't understand what you mean by control. Oh, you're on an energy shift. Yeah, I think that we're feeling that a little bit too. Okay, so with the control thing, I think the only way you can really describe that is by understanding that when something happens, we want to see a particular outcome. And sometimes we're so focused on what we want the outcome to be, we don't let it unfold as it needs to. So we start to control it. So we start putting in energy to push it in the direction we want to see it go in rather than allowing it to unfold the way it should. So sometimes the control thing can be difficult for people to understand how they control, but very good lesson to start learning. You've got the same problem. That's what I said. We're all the same. We're all working on all the same things. It's pretty awesome, really. The control thing is something that I'm guilty too. See, there you go. Part of the same team here, is part of the same community. But it is hard to understand how you do control things. Oh, okay, there you go. You can't push things along. No, and I know too. And the thing is when you're already perceptive and you can already feel things coming, or that something's going to come in, it's very difficult to just allow it to unfold the way it is. It's a bit like trying to have a baby before the baby's due. It's a really good one, isn't it? When you get sort of sick of being pregnant, you're like, okay, all these things you've been told about having babies, running around the block, I don't know, all those crazy things, eating curries, drinking things. You can't, you can't make a baby come before its time. Not unless, no manipulating. That's it. No manipulating. That's hard not to do, isn't it? And you know what? It's funny because this comes back to the codependency, you see. Because I used to always think with codependency that I was the victim. And that I was meeting these people who, were treating me poorly or whatever. Let's just sort of say basically that. And then, of course, I started to realize that whether I was in a relationship with someone who was, being abusive or aggressive, then I still had a part to play in that. And of course, you realize that perhaps some of you have realized, I know I did, that it is about manipulation, using your sexuality as a tool very often, pushing things along quickly because you want to sort of seal the deal on something. Those sort of things, those manipulative things. And you start to realize that as a codependent, you're not totally blameless. There are certain things we do to make sure that we win the prize. So, and you've realized too, yeah. So this has been a new realization for me in the last few years, after spending some time alone, that I try to force outcomes. I try to, as I said, seal the deal. What can you say? And it has been part of what I guess I learned to do as a child. Yeah, it is about control. What you do as a child to try and get your own way. And emotions have been a big one for me there too. Understanding the use of emotion to try and manipulate. So we're all learning. I always say to you guys, I learn just as much as you do. I'm on exactly the same journey. We're all learning the same thing. Chandra, I'm doing a Facebook Live tomorrow at 9 a.m. If any of you are interested, on my Facebook page at the Aussie Goddess. So if you want to come across, I'll do some card pulls for everybody there, or as many as I can. Yeah, see? Well, I you know what? I look back and I feel very victimy when I look back at my childhood. I was desperate to get attention, obviously didn't get enough. So, found lots of ways to try and get myself attention. And of course, when I got to being in my teen years, I realized that the way to go to do that was to be a rebel and just go up against everything and anything to try and get attention. So whether it was negative or positive didn't really matter. Nobody seemed to notice me anyway, so I just went a bit silly. Um, Thanks, Michelle. Um, so you become you often as a child, if you feel deprived of things, you definitely become a bit more rebellious as an adult, and going into your teen years, of course, that's a lot of acting out, trying to get yourself the attention you want. I don't know that I was particularly evil, but I know, a lot of things I did in terms of getting attention probably weren't the best ways to go about it, but um, that's a nice way to look at it, Sarah. So Sarah says, "Me too, but we're not victims." I guess it's just the way you tend to view yourself, isn't it? Like you, a lot of the time, we think of victim mentality as being, whining and grizzling about what we don't have. But the victim mentality goes so much deeper than that, and we build habits into our day to day life from having those experiences that really do mean we're coming from that victim mentality. It may not be obvious to us until we start to really dig in amongst it about how we go about getting attention or doing what we do. Yeah, that's it. I am a rebel. I'm probably not as much as a rebel. As much of a rebel now as I was when I was younger, but I certainly I tried to, be the trendsetter. I seemed to always get the boys. I didn't have many friends though. They didn't like that whole lot at all. So, um, yeah, see, that's it. The victim mentality becomes part of your ingrained personality, rather than just a thing you can point out to people. So there's some things that we don't see as being victims. So, for example, we see a person as having issues or problems and we jump in to help them. And when they don't take our help, we wonder what's wrong, why they're not taking our help. That's victim mentality. So there is a lot more depth to being a victim than what we probably see, that creates some of things in our personality that we don't even see as being victims. So trying to help people out, trying to fix people, all part of the victim mentality. We don't see that way because we're trying to help others. So we see that as a good thing. We don't see it that we want something from that. And that comes back to that codependency. So it's a big bucket of stuff. Oh, thank you, Lenore. I hope so. We talk about different things all the time, don't we? And I think sometimes it just makes us feel a little human, knowing that we're all on a very similar journey of self-discovery and how we find out about that. If you want a really, really good person to listen to around the codependency, narcissism, there's a guy called Richard Grannon, and I think he calls his site the Spartan Coach. And when I went through the last very damaging relationship I had, I spent a lot of time watching him to understand my part in relationships. So I sort of been on a bit of a journey of those cycles of relationships for a very long time. And each time I came out, I did some learning, but I didn't really understand my part in things, because you go into that victim mentality where you think, well, I've done everything I should have done in this relationship, and this person's been cruel and manipulative, and it's all their fault, and I did all the right things. Why am I the one sitting here now, in this situation? So I started to really think about what was my part within those relationships. What was I actually doing to yeah, but that's choosing to be the victim, is a choice. What I'm talking about is the victim mentality that's set within our personality. So you're going for victim mentality up the end of the scale, where we say, why me? What did I do wrong? That sort of victim mentality. What we don't look at is the hidden stuff that creates from the victim mentality habits, ways of doing things, ways of seeing things that we don't see as the victim mentality. So when it's out there for everyone to see, we take notice of it and we think that person's got a victim mentality. But when it's deep within our personality, we don't see what we do as being that. And being the rescuer, being the person who wants to always do for others, that's all part of the victim mentality. And then when people don't want to do what we want to do, we think we're helping and they're not responding. So therefore, they're the ones that are wrong because we're being the helper. But actually, that's still part of that same victim mentality. Richard Grannon does a lot of talking around some of this stuff. There's also another guy, a South African guy, I can't remember his name, who also does a lot around the victim mentality, about the stuff that's ingrained in your personality that you don't actually see it. It's nice to be responsible if you know what it is, but if you have core beliefs about yourself, sometimes you don't know that you're even doing that. You don't even know deep within yourself why those things are sitting with you. So they're not something you can just give away. So sometimes people say you need to release that energy, you need to get out of that mindset. But sometimes we don't actually know because what we've learned has become something we do all the time and becomes part of who we are. No, and I didn't know really the codependency thing. I think that I always thought, it was the other person creating the problem. That I always seemed to get these people that were cruel and mean, and I could never understand why that was. And of course, I'd have a couple of years of working on myself before I get into the next relationship, thinking I'd solved the problem, and then of course I get into the next one and find I'd be with the same person who just had a different face. Unfortunately, doing that over and over again, you start to wonder with yourself why you keep attracting people like that. So this time around, I've been pretty much on my own for, completely on my own for 2 years this time around, but I've been out of the dating field before for 4 years and gone straight back into another relationship still the same. So it's been really difficult for me to understand what are my underlying things that I see. And that's what I've been working on. And that's what I said at the moment. It's coming down to the ego, the learnings, the core beliefs you have about yourself. And they sometimes will manifest in ways that you don't see them as a victim mentality. I do understand what you're saying about speaking your truth. It isn't always about that all the time either. I think the hardest part for me is to understand the emotions. So because of the complex PTSD that you get from these situations, very often some of those things stay with you. And then when somebody says or does something that upsets you, immediately all the emotions of the past all come up at once, and you're feeling really sort of overwhelmed by all this emotion over something very, very sort of small. And you're like, why do I feel this way when this person's only said this? But then you realize all the past stuff comes up with it. So that's sort of what I'm saying. The core beliefs and the emotional stuff is what I'm currently looking at to see how I respond to things. But it's been a really interesting journey, and it is hard to break the cycle. And speaking your truth is being honest about things is really important. But sometimes that's really hard to do when you're sort of always. The core belief thing's really interesting. Actually, you'll probably start doing some meditations on that to really see. To see what your core beliefs are, because sometimes they're not so obvious. My biggest one is that I know is the self-sabotage, the fear of success. So I still have a little bit of trouble with that, and that's what I'm working on at the moment. Yeah, she is funny, isn't she? So every day, every week, every month for me is like a little bit of unpacking. And I'm glad you're all doing it too, because you get to share your experiences with me, which is pretty cool. And yes, the saying no is one of the hardest ones for us to start out with, isn't it? Being able to say to somebody, no, I don't want to do that. And the funny part is, oh, yeah, self-sabotage relationships. Yeah. That comes back to attachment and abandonment issues. We can talk on that too one day. Yeah, yours is not being enough. Yeah, I think that mine comes from that too, Felice. A lot of the time, I think that it's really difficult to actually say to people, because you sort of feel like really uncomfortable saying to people that you don't feel that you're good enough to do things. Yes, the attachment abandonment comes as part of that package. So you're talking about a whole package of things here around people. Um, it's good to recognize them and it's good to work on them. And once you have an understanding and you sort of listen to how you do things, say things, as someone said, being able to say no to people and not feel that you're, crushing somebody else, especially if they play the guilt game on you. But yeah, the guilt game, that's something I can honestly say that I spent a lot of years with the guilt and shame of, being, trying to be honest with people without, without like putting my own self in jeopardy. But that's the way it goes. It's all part of the journey. And you wonder too, like you see all the other people out in the world who don't feel, do, or say these things, but they act out in ways that are really damaging for themselves and other people. And you think, well, what is it about some people that you recognize these behaviors and these issues and you work on them, and other people never ever see them or never ever pay attention to them? And it's really interesting to see. I mean, I have people today. We generally have about 20-25 people on board each time we do one of these, and you're from all over the world. Why do we always all experience the same things? Why do we all go on a very similar journey? um Thank you. Why is it? Do you ever wonder, like, you think all of us around the world, we've all experienced, maybe the similar things in our childhood, the similar things with our relationships, the similar things with people around us. Why do we all manifest this particular way? Why is that? And psychology is great because it does explain to us a certain amount of things, but it doesn't really explain. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. It's interesting to see the patterns of behavior, and we are seeing that people are working on them a lot more. And as I said, it's sort of like, I remember when I was studying psychology, I was like, it just never seemed to fit. It never seemed to quite satisfy my curiosity about people. So then I did social science and I got to understand, it still didn't fit. And it was like, why is it then, that spirituality shows me how everybody grows a certain way and comes out of it a certain way? Even people who talk about, having, fabulous parents and fabulous upbringing still go through some of these things the same way. Very interesting little journey. Psychology is only for crazy people. Thanks, Darcy. I am a little bit crazy, but you know that already. Psychology just didn't cut it completely for me. It's sort of like, it's like one page in a whole book. Um, why is it that in a family, everybody, hey, Winter, how you going? How is it in a family that, you have 5 children, 6 children, 9 children all raised the same way, but yet not every one of them turns out that way? So you've got a family of, 6 children who have got a very violent father who drinks alcohol a lot and beats all the kids. And 1 or 2 children will become narcissists and the other ones will become codependents. Now, I know that there's the positioning in the family, which we know is important. I was an eldest child. So if any of you are eldest child, you will understand my story. And why is it then, you have, out of a group of 6 children, you'll have 2 people who are very abusive towards their own children and the rest of them won't. And then in amongst that, you'll have one person who has this incredible relationship and go, yeah, but the coping skills can be something you learned. And they also something inherent. There's something that's born into us. Like, example, I don't know if I've talked to you about my past, but I never knew my father. I never met my father till a couple of years ago, so 50 odd years old. And I grew up in a family where I really didn't know who my father was, but I didn't really find that out until I was in my late 40s. So, and I remember the first time seeing a photograph of my father. I always felt like I was very different to my family. Nobody ever told me who I was. Nobody ever said I was somebody else's child. That never even got spoken about. The way I was treated within the family unit really, when I look back, spoke a lot, but I didn't realize a lot of that, of course, being in amongst it all. But when I first saw a photograph of my father, I remember thinking it was the first time in my life I'd looked at something and felt a sense of knowing who I was. Um, so even though I've never been told, even though I never knew about all this stuff, there was this underlying understanding right from the beginning that something wasn't right. So whether or not you talk about, whether or not people treat you differently because they know what's going on, and whether or not the way they then treat you reflects to all of the other people around you that you are different or whatever. And then, of course, obviously there is some heritage there that comes from your family and some things that come through. Yes, a lot of eldest children here, but a lot of that it actually comes through. So you sort of go back to the nature nurture argument. So you've got the nature nurture argument, you've got the psychology of someone, you've got the sociology of how that person is raised, you've got personality traits which are inherent. Not one particular way of working out how a person is fits. All of those things need to be looked at. So when we talk about, there's a lot of, Lenore, middle child. That's really cute. So there's a lot of eldest children here. So what are we saying? Out of all the people here, we have 6 eldest and there's 18 people on board. So that's quite a good percentage of eldest children, really, isn't it? Yes, there's my beautiful face. But yeah, so we think psychology sort of cuts it for people, and we tend to sort of bag people into that whole psychology thing. But actually, that the whole family dynamic is another thing that changes things. Where you're born in your family, what traits you're born with, all of those things. So there's no particular way of us turning out the same way. So why is it, a lot of people, hey, how you going, Patty? Another eldest child. Very interesting. So how is it then, you can talk to people over the world. There's another one. Wow, we have a huge amount of eldest children here. They're very, very interesting. Maybe there's something to be said for that. But you go all around the world. Oh, there you go. There's a young one. Youngest of 7. Holy dooly. That would have been a tough one. Although you could have been very very well loved being the youngest of 7 too, so I can't make a judgment on that. I couldn't even imagine though, because I know I see kids mollycoddling the youngest ones too, especially if 7, because the eldest ones would probably been a good deal of age difference. Second, so we've got people all places in the family. So why is it then, when you look at all of us coming from a different background with a different, oh, you were the only girl. Oh boy, that would have been tough. Were you a tomboy because you had all brothers? Or were you an overly loved little girl and very girly? Because that will make a difference too. Yeah, so why is it all over the world I'm speaking to you people from all these different countries and we're all very similar? And yet we've all had all of those different upbringings, all of those different heritages, all of those different situations. Okay, all right, good question, Patty. How old were you then fully here. Patty's made a very good point. How many of you rushed out to get married and have children to escape the confines of your home? Because many of us thought that we could fix the world by having children ourselves, so we could raise our children to be better than what we were, or that we could love children. 18, there you go. Felice, how old were you? Married at 35. You were a late runner. 19 for Haley. Because we a lot of us go out and have families and children because we think that's what you need to do. None of us, my family, talking core beliefs. I remember my father saying to me, women didn't have careers. What good was a career to me? I'm just going to get married and have children anyway, because that was my place. 20. Yeah. I left home at 16 too, Lenore. I was 16. Actually left home at 15, and the policeman made me go back. So I left again at 16 and had my first child at 19. So much the same. So there's something about this personality type. We're sort of forming a personality type here almost, aren't we? Oh, Darcy, you don't have any children. You're always Aunt Darcy to my friends' children. That's really cute. That's really cute. Yeah, I think so. I think that we're all very, very similar, despite the fact we've all come from these sort of incredibly different backgrounds. So this is where sort of things like, yes, we all know that one, Lenore. We can talk a lot more on that, I think, for a lot of people who are very empathic, because a lot of our personality isn't really who we are. We tend to behave a certain way so we don't create conflict. We become a certain person because we want to always be seen. We always want to be good. We always try to please others. And then, of course, that just becomes a habit through our lifetime then. So it's very interesting how everybody's a lot of people got married very young. You know what? I thought at 19 I didn't think I was young at all. I thought I was very worldly and knowledgeable and whatever else. So all I wanted to do was have children, have a family, have a really happy life, and and have the happy relationship that I didn't see my parents having. So it was quite interesting, really. Yeah, the sifting through. This is what we've been talking about here. So this is what I want to say. We've been going through this here, the codependency, the I don't know about a troubled childhood, but certainly some of the issues that they have shown around attachment and abandonment issues can occur in good families as well as not so good families. So yeah, it's sort of very interesting though for the journey, because we all are understanding codependency, core beliefs, narcissism, all of those things we understand because we've been on some sort of journey here, which is quite interesting. Yeah, having children at 19, yeah, I'd had 3 by the time I was 25. So my oldest is 42 now. So you know how old I am now. And then it was really interesting, to realize that we've all started to understand our journeys and start to work towards them. We all come from different parts of the world. We're all manifesting in a very similar way in terms of our, understanding the journey. So it's all very interesting, but I don't think, and I don't believe psychology is enough to describe what we're all going through and what we're all. See, we're getting to that whole controversial subject around spirituality now, because, a lot of us are unwinding a very human existence, and yet all of us. Oh, wow. Hey, Melissa. Hi from Chicago. The Windy City, they call that, don't they? Darcy, doesn't matter how you've had your life, if it's different to somebody else's, that's fabulous. And it's you should see my dad. He just absolutely fabulous. Oh, you've got snow today. Absolutely, Lenore. So when you start thinking about it and people are trying to describe this as being psychology or sociology or, type in a family, or whether you're male or female, whether you had brothers and sisters, whether you're big, small family, whatever, the only thing that we all have in common is spirituality, and yet we're all on the same path. So who taught you spirituality? I think that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, if you have spiritual beliefs, you have very similar beliefs. We don't learn it like a religion. It's something that unfolds within us. It's something that comes with all this. So it's like all of us, different ages, different sizes, shapes, personality types, family types, everything. So your mum taught you how to be spiritual, Darcy? Is that what you're saying? So your mum was a very spiritual person? Because I have met people who've had a lot of parents with spirituality, which means that you get a very nice start into your life. But it's very interesting, isn't it? How did I start my journey in terms of spirituality? I reckon I would have probably been maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I remember hearing a lot about the Bible, and I wanted to go to Sunday school. And my parents wouldn't let me. They didn't believe in religion. And I remember going out and signing up for this free Bible class that I could do by correspondence. That's a lot of years ago now. And I remember sitting in my wardrobe so nobody saw me studying the Bible, because I was really curious as to what this Bible was and what it was all about. So I did this Bible. Yeah, psychology doesn't sit well with spirituality, but then none of them really do. That's why I said they all contribute, but they don't all fit. So I started off doing that to try and understand my journey. I'd been seeing things at that point for many, many years. And when I was probably about 14, my parents put me, I think I talked about this the other day, my parents put me on sleeping tonic because I couldn't sleep. I was terrified of falling asleep. I always saw ghosts and I didn't really understand it. So I remember going through all of that probably around about then. By the time I was probably 16, 17, I was reading cards, doing cartomancy. So I was reading from a normal deck. I don't know how I learned to do that. I have no idea. That's why I always wonder, what you bring forward with you from past lives. But I could read people through using just a normal card deck. I think I probably was about 17 when I had my first tarot reading. I went to the markets in Sydney, Paddy's Markets, the old Paddy's Markets. And I remember having a reading there. It was the first reading I'd ever had. And I thought, I couldn't believe somebody could see into me. It really blew me away. And then from then onwards, like it was just a bit of a journey then, I guess. And then I went probably in my mid-20s, I went into a bit of a phase of trying to get rid of it all and just trying to work from a logical mindset. So I closed myself down for quite a long time. I still did my tarot cards. Then I got into tarot then, and I was still doing my tarot cards, but I didn't really talk about it. I never told anybody. I was really embarrassed about it all. My family had become quite religious, and then of course I became the evil person in the family when I really never changed at all, which I think was quite interesting to see their take on that. And I became really ashamed of all of that stuff, so I tried to sort of hide it away. Somehow or another I really thought that I could live very differently if I just denied the spirituality. And that came, and I really ploughed into my work. So I became a real, I was going to say alcoholic then. No, not really. I became a real workaholic. So I started working like ridiculous hours, putting 60, 70 hours a week and just sort of burying myself in that. And then in my mid-30s, probably about 35 years old, I had what would have probably been classed as a breakdown. I started to get panic disorder. I found it very difficult to manage the panic attacks. I started losing weight very quickly. I had to give up my job because I got so sick. I dropped dramatically in weight. I think I got down to about 55 kilos. And I'm not a short person. I'm about 5'7", 5'8", 167 centimeters. And I found it very difficult to work and understand the panic attacks. So I started getting into a lot of reading. That's when I decided I'd go back and relearn. I did psychology, social science. I did a certificate for 2 years in a diploma in youth work, and I went to work in youth refuges. And that was really the start of what I would see as the light worker journey, where I started sort of giving back and started putting my energy in there. I had once I came out of that panic disorder, I read my way out of that. I learned through books. I learned through reading how to get out of that and how to get back. And I remember going to the doctors and the doctor just saying, here's some Valium, go home, you're a neurotic woman. And I was like, no, there has to be something wrong with me. So I really understood. Oh, there you go. You're made alive. Well done. So it's been a huge journey. So let's say, for the time I came out of that, I started reading professionally per se, maybe about 10 years ago now. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I'd been doing fairs and other things out and about. I started really embracing it probably about 10 years ago, thoroughly, like 100%, and started really listening. And then, of course, over those years, even when I closed myself down, I was still having really potent visions, glances into the future. I was still seeing things that freaked my children out, but which is quite funny, really. But I probably really started embracing it about 10 years ago. So, yeah, see, that's it, isn't it? And people don't want spirituality. I guess my way of always looking at it is spirituality is a very dangerous thing. It makes us very individual and it makes us very independent, which really and truly goes against the nature of control. So even though we've been on the journey, I had that with my mum too, thinking that that tarot stuff is all evil. Yeah. And it turned me off for a long time. I thought, because I'm so empathic, I was like, oh, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm evil. Maybe I need to stop reading the tarot cards. What a journey. But now, as I said, Spirit's been getting me on a new journey, and every day now oh, you've had a similar story too, Hayley. Yes, I sort of, as I said, we've all got so much in common. It's really beautiful to share our stories. It's just harder for you to share your stories. So I think I've asked people before, if you want to share your story, write it up, and I'm quite happy to read and share it on here if you want to. And I agree with you, people are fascinating, but I can't understand why we think psychology describes people, we can label people. Understand that people need to be labeled for certain reasons, with personality disorders and things like that. But I don't know that we take all of the other, variables into consideration when we decide a person is a certain kind of person. So for me, psychology is great as a little bit of a baseline, but it really doesn't bring all the other stuff into it. That we've been talking about. The mirroring is fantastic because that's what everybody does for each other. And that's why it's been lovely to do that on this channel, to share stories, because sometimes it helps you to feel somewhat normal. There you go. Beautiful. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I do hope you're feeling well. I better get off. I've been on here for nearly an hour. How quickly has that gone? All right, I'm going. I need to do some stuff. I have ice cream. I have ice cream as a treat this afternoon. No, I embrace my weird, Hayley. I embrace my weird. It's really important to embrace your differences. Oh, Melissa, thank you. I appreciate all of you too. And I say to you every time, you may think that I'm doing such great things for you, but you have no idea what wonderful things you do for me. Terrible typer. Soul Pouring, what is your name? Soul Pouring's fabulous. What time is it here? It's 1:11. 111. 1:11 p.m. So lunchtime. I bought ice cream. Hey Jen, how you going? So we know to call you Jen now. Ice cream. Did somebody ask me what sort of ice cream it was? Well, of course it's salty caramel. What else would I eat? Hey Emily, where did you come from? Thank you. Thank you so much. You've become important to me too. Oh, you're 11:11 there. Wow. That's really interesting that we've gone the 1111. There's some angel message there for us, isn't there? Thank you. What date? Well, I'm the 18th. So we would be in front of you if you're in the rest of the world. Australia is sort of a little bit in front. And then if you're in New Zealand, then you would be in front of us because New Zealand leads the world in terms of time. Salty caramel. What's so funny about that? That's the best thing that was ever invented. I remember my kids eating McDonald's fries with the ice cream. And 10/11 in Chicago. 9/11. Where are you, Darcy? So you're in the US too, aren't you? You were making fun of me when you think it's the best too. So yeah, I bought myself some salted caramel Idaho. Okay, so a few different time zones in America here, but beautiful. That was 111, and someone else was 1111. 8/11 in Oregon. So wow, there's some huge time differences over there, isn't there? All right, so I promised myself I would watch a movie today and have some salty caramel ice cream. Oh, okay. You're pretty scary, Haley, if you're thinking the same thing. Oh, 11:12 in Canada. Mountain time here. Rhode Island, 11:12. Oh, you used to do the McDonald's chips and ice cream. It was the salt and the ice cream. I have this thing for like bacon and ice cream. So I love having the American breakfast with maple syrup and yum ice cream. Oh, Patty, that's beautiful. Thank you. You don't have to remain invisible. Everybody here is really similar. We're all talking about the same thing. Bacon on a maple donut. Stop. Stop it. I'm going for my ice cream. Mwah! Love you all. Look after yourselves.